Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mack Story.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for stopping by Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. Hope you enjoyed the series that just wrapped up with the last episode on Blue Collar Leadership and Supervision. If you didn't catch that series, make sure you go back and check that out. It's a 30-part series on my book, Blue Collar Leadership and Supervision. Started at episode 111, and really that book was written for the formal authority leader who's never had any formal leadership development training. It's a great introduction for that person, but it's also a very good resource for those who've maybe been leading for years, who've been through lots of different types of leadership development. A lot of people tell me that my stuff is very simple and they get lots of wisdom out of it and lots of value no matter how long they've been leading or what they've been through. The other book you may want to check out, you may not be familiar if you haven't been listening to the podcast series very long. My book, Blue Collar Leadership, Leading from the Front Lines. That book was written for entry-level, frontline people in the blue-collar workforce. And the thing about that book is it's full of principles on how to become a highly effective individual. They actually apply to everyone, but I wrote it for the entry-level blue-collar workforce. I've also got a 30-part series on that book. It starts at episode 65. If you want to go back and check those out, and I'd highly recommend listening to the audio, the podcast, and then hopefully if you've got the book, read along in the book because you're going to get a lot more out of the book than you are just from the podcast. But if you haven't done that, make sure you take time, go check those out. So today, between now and the end of the year, I'm going to just share some random podcasts before I start a new series to kick off 2020. That new series is going to be on my book, 10 Foundational Elements of Intentional Transformation, how to become your best self. Since the foundation of leadership development is personal development, that's why I'm going to kick off that series at the beginning of the year. So I'll start off with personal development. Really my book, the book out of all of my books that focuses the most on personal development, personal transformation. I'm going to kick off that 2020 with that book. And then when that's done, I'm probably going to go to my top level book, the one on leading culture. I'm probably going to do a series on it, Blue Collar Leadership and Culture, the 5 components for building high performance teams. So that's what you'll see in 2020 on the podcast is a series on transforming self and then a series on transforming culture from a high level leadership position. And again, that's going to be some powerful teaching. You don't have to wait though. You can go check those books out. You can get them at Amazon. They're on audio, ebook, and paperback. All right. So today's episode is going to be titled, Are Your Leaders Engaged? And I'm going to talk to you about the 4 levels of leadership engagement. This is something that the first time I've wrote about this or talked about it, I've actually got a LinkedIn article I wrote, and I'm kind of going to be using it to teach this lesson. So if you like what you hear in audio, make sure, and you want to share it with someone else, make sure you go to my LinkedIn profile and look under my articles. I've got several hundred articles on there, but this is one that was published on November 14th. So you could actually download that or share it electronically with someone if you like what I'm going to talk about. But I've noticed over the years when I'm helping leaders develop leaders, and really it applies to all individuals, but in the context here, I'm talking about the leaders. So the top leader will bring us in and want us to help grow and develop the leaders who report to the top leader, formal authority leaders. And then what happens is we see what I see and what I call 4 levels of leadership engagement. So as I'm talking about this, you can look up at your leaders and think about which level is my leader. Are they a 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then if you're a leader of leaders, meaning you're a top level leader or upper level leader, and you have formal authority leaders who report to you, you can kind of use this to kind of figure out where those individuals are relative to the 4 levels of leadership engagement. So what I'm going to do is I'll highlight the 4 levels, and then I'll go back and I'll go down into each one of them briefly just to help you understand and learn about those. But the one thing you need to know is disengagement above leads to disengagement below. You've probably heard me talk about that before. I mean, disengagement's a big deal out there. For decades, there's been about 60 or 70% disengagement whenever someone does research to find out who's engaged and who's not. So what I always say, though, is if the folks on the front lines are disengaged, it's because the people they report to are disengaged. And I don't mean disengaged relative to management of people. I mean disengaged relative to leadership of people. Because leadership leads to engagement. Management of people leads to disengagement. But here again, I'm talking about the leaders. So that question I asked a minute ago, are your leaders engaged? Let's dive into this thing and see where they're at. So I want to share a quote with you. I'm reading a book at the moment. I'm getting tons of quotes from this book. It's called The Leadership Challenge. And every time I read it, I just I load up my quote file with quotes. And here's a quote from that book. It says, titles are granted, but it's your behavior that earns you respect. Titles are granted, but it's your behavior that earns you respect. And what that means is someone above you can't grant you respect. They can grant you a title and a position and authority, but you have to earn respect. And as a leader, your level of engagement is going to determine how much respect you earn. If you're not engaged, you're not going to earn any respects. Plain and simple. People may respect your position, but they won't respect you as a leader. So Rhea and I travel all across the USA each year supporting top leaders and business owners who value developing the leaders who report to them. When a leader invests in the development of the formal leaders who report to them, those leaders will choose to engage at varying levels. And I call this, as I mentioned, the 4 levels of leadership engagement. So let's dive in. And I'm going to briefly again share about each of these 4 levels for those of you who want to get right to the point before I explore each of them individually in a bit more detail. The 4 levels of leadership engagement. Level 1 is actually not engaged. I call level 1 absolutely disengaged. That's level 1, absolutely disengaged. These low impact leaders, and that's using the term loosely, leader, refuse to engage in personal growth and leadership development for any reason. They prefer to continue managing people as objects and have no interest in learning how to effectively lead people. So that's level 1, absolutely disengaged. Level 2, this is where a lot of people fall into this category. A lot of leaders, a lot of people. But again, I'm focusing on the leaders. And I use the term, again, loosely here for level 2. The level 2 is reluctantly engaged. These low-impact leaders feel they must participate in personal growth and leadership development only because their leader expects them to be engaged, not because they actually want to be engaged. These reluctantly engaged leaders have no authentic interest and continue managing and manipulating others. And we're going to talk about all these again more in depth after I kind of give you a brief overview. So the 4th level of leadership engagement, the 3rd level of leadership engagement is selfishly engaged. Selfishly engaged. So these leaders are excited to be engaged, but for their own benefit. They have a strong desire to become better leaders. However, they're motivated by their desire to improve their own lives, both personally and professionally. They want to lead themselves to a higher level of success. It's not a bad thing, but again, that's level 3, and I'm going to share with you level 4. Level 4 is a higher level. The 4th level of leadership engagement is selflessly engaged. So level 3 was selfishly engaged. Level 4, and the highest level, as I begin to talk about this, is selflessly engaged. So at level 3, you're selfish. At level 4, you're selfless. A little bit different there. So selflessly engaged. These are high impact leaders, and they're excited to be engaged, but not for their own benefit, but to help grow and develop others. And they also have a strong desire to become better leaders, but their focus is outward and not inward. So these selflessly engaged leaders, they're motivated by their desire to help others have a better life at home and at work. And they're really more focused on the personal side. But because they are focused on the personal side, it's going to have a great impact on the professional side at work. So selflessly engaged leaders, they want to lead others to success. So selfishly engaged was all about me leading myself to a success. Selflessly engaged, I'm engaged with intent to help lead others to success. Big difference there. So John Baldoni, he had this to say. He says, the art of leadership involves bringing people together for common cause. The practice of leadership requires commitment to action for the common good. Both are easy to address, but hard to implement. So let's dive into these levels a little bit. Just give you kind of a better picture. So level 1, again, is absolutely disengaged. Absolutely disengaged leaders, they don't invest any time on personal growth and leadership development unless they're required to attend training or development sessions. So they're only engaged when they have to be, but they're still disengaged even while they're there. They're the folks who roll their eyes, cross their arms, don't participate, that sort of stuff. They choose to intentionally manage others by leveraging the authority that comes with their position, their title, and their rank. They're content purely to manage people. So when it comes to meeting expectations relative to leadership development, they resist doing what's required of them. And that ain't enough. These folks also badmouth those who are on board, whether it's their peers or folks who report to them even, or folks above them. These people, these disengaged leaders, they're toxic leaders, and they're also toxic team members. And I'll tell you this, these leaders are thorns in the side of those trying to positively transform the culture, because these people are going against the grain. They're doing right the opposite. They're ensuring the culture doesn't change or either that it gets worse. So why would great people with options want to join a mediocre team with low impact leadership at the top who don't value the people? I'm here to tell you they wouldn't, and they won't. Not for long, not if they're good, high impact people. So I just want to share a little note right here. I'll do that at the end of each one of these levels. So the note for absolutely disengaged leaders is when top leaders allow these absolutely disengaged leaders to remain and contaminate the team, the top leader's integrity is questioned, as it should be, because they're not willing to do what's best for the team. And as a result, they not only lose influence, but they also lose the respect of those who have to work with or for those toxic leaders. Disengaged leaders should be removed from the team. If they continue to resist buying in to the personal growth and leadership development initiatives, they need to get gone. We'll give them some time, but they don't get it forever. And the higher level leader they are on the org chart, the less time they should get, because they have too much influence on derailing and contaminating the process. But when the top leader gets rid of the disengaged leaders, the disengaged leader is going to be better off. So will the leader and the rest of the team. So let's dive a little bit into level 2. those reluctantly engaged leaders. So the reluctantly engaged leaders, they're only engaged because they feel they have to be and are afraid not to be. They have to be and they're afraid not to be. They are reluctantly focused on personal growth and leadership development. They're engaged only because a leader above expects them to be. In other words, their engagement is not self-motivated, it's leader-motivated. If the leader was not motivating them to be engaged, they would not be engaged. And as a result, their efforts are artificial and superficial. These reluctantly engaged leaders, they live by the motto, fake it until you make it, which is an ineffective strategy relative to personal growth and leadership development. Because of this, if you continue to fake it, you're never going to make it. Not when it comes to character development. So these reluctantly engaged leaders are focused on appearing to be instead of focusing on how to actually be. Big difference. And they do only what's required when it's required until it's no longer required. They're poor role models for their peers and for their team. And these leaders sabotage, got tangled up right there. That ain't one of those country words. These leaders sabotage cultural transformation efforts by creating a confusing example. So I want to share with you, on that note, I want to share with you a quote, a couple of quotes. First one is from Norman Vincent Peale, and he says, "Nothing is more confusing than people who give good advice but set a bad example." And then right the opposite by John Maxwell, and John says, "Nothing is more convincing than people who give good advice and set a bad example, and set a good example." So John's quote is, "Nothing is more convincing than people who give good advice and set a good example." And Norman Vincent Peale says, "Nothing is more confusing than people who give good advice but set a bad example." So the thing I want to note on this section or this level is that these reluctantly engaged leaders, they do tremendous damage to your team because they're pretending to be something they're not. Their leader either doesn't realize they're being fooled by these pretenders, or worse, their leader knows truly what's going on and chooses to accept it. So everyone who's on board with personal growth and leadership development, everyone who's actually on board knows who these reluctantly engaged leaders are and which leaders above are allowing it below. That's a key deal right there. When top leaders allow these reluctantly engaged leaders to pretend to be engaged without holding them accountable, the top leader's integrity is also questioned, again, as it should be, because they're not willing to confront the pretenders. And these pretenders pretend to be on board when their leader is around or their participation is required, but the pretender's team knows what really goes on when the pretender's leader isn't around. Had a drill instructor at boot camp at Parris Island back in 1987. And when his boss, the senior drill instructor, would leave, he would call us all in the big circle, have us at attention, and he'd walk around with this grin on his face, and he'd just be saying, "When the cat's away, the mouse will play." And he was the mouse. And what he was saying was when the big dog was gone, he could do what he wanted to. And that's what these pretenders do. That's what these pretenders do. They're reluctantly engaged. They pretend to be on board, but it's just all a big old sham. And everybody knows it. And everybody suffers as a result of it. But there's a top leader somewhere that's allowing it to happen, and they're losing tons of integrity. So let's talk about level 3 in depth a little bit. Selfishly engaged. Selflessly engaged leaders are not necessarily bad people, but they are always selfish leaders. They're self-motivated, may be seen as positive or negative by others. Depends on their motive. They simply want to get better results and want to become highly effective. But some are highly effective because they build relationships. And then some are highly effective because they leverage their power to control and manipulate others. That's why they could be positive or negative. It depends on how they're being while they do what they do. And either way, their interest is fueled by their drive to develop themselves in an effort to climb the organizational chart and also to climb the corporate pay scale so that they personally can live a better life. So the positive leaders get better results by learning to apply leadership principles effectively. The negative leaders, and again, I use that term loosely here, get better results by learning to use leadership principles to more effectively manipulate others. See, the motive changed. They're still both level 3. They're still both level 3 leadership engagement people, selfishly engaged, but their motive is completely different. So they do more than is required because it's not about doing a better job. For them, it's about creating a better life for themselves. They may or may not be a positive role model for those who also want to become successful. It depends on how they're being while they're climbing. And I'll just say this. These leaders will ultimately have limited influence because of their self-centered motive. They're self-centered. How they're being while they're self-centered is what makes them either positive or negative. Stephen M. R. Covey had this to say: producing results almost always gives a person more choices, more options, more flexibility. That's what's going to happen when you move up to level 3 of leadership engagement. You're going to have a lot more options. So the note I want to share with you here is these selfishly engaged leaders are extremely concerned with climbing the leadership mountain themselves. But they aren't directly trying to help others climb the leadership mountain. One thing to remember is this: until you can effectively and efficiently climb the leadership mountain, you're not positioned to help others climb it. Therefore, many selflessly engaged leaders, that's level 4 that we're about to talk about, were first selfishly engaged leaders. So the goal at level 3 should always be to quickly climb to level 4. Don't remain a selfish leader. Move upward on these 4 levels and become a selfless leader. So I want to share with you now about level 4. So level 4, again, is selflessly engaged. These selflessly engaged leaders have a passion for developing others. They're motivated from within because of their desire to help others. And as a result, they are relentlessly and intentionally focused on their own development in an effort to benefit others. So they focus on personal growth because they want to be better equipped in order to more effectively help others climb the leadership mountain. These leaders, their main focus is on helping others learn and apply leadership principles personally and professionally. And they do far more than is required because their vision is about more than themselves or the company. Their vision is purely about helping people succeed. So they have high integrity and they live what they teach. They're excellent role models to everyone. They are seen as significant because they want to help others become successful. And I'll share a quote again from the book, The Leadership Challenge here. The most significant contribution leaders can make is not to today's bottom line. It is to the long-term development of people and institutions so they can adapt, change, prosper, and grow. That's a pretty powerful quote right there. So the note I want to share with you about the level 4 leadership engagement is this: these selflessly engaged leaders focus on unleashing people's potential, which results in powerful personal and cultural transformation. And because these leaders have a high degree of character and integrity and truly value developing others simply to help them climb to the next level and beyond, these leaders develop a tremendous amount of trust and influence with others. This high degree of trust results in these leaders having a large amount of authentic influence. Their influence isn't artificially based on their position, their title and rank, control and power, but rather it's authentically based in their character, who they are, and what they value. So again, if you enjoyed this if you enjoyed this lesson on the 4 levels of leadership engagement, you can get a text version of it on my LinkedIn profile. This article was published November 14th, 2019. And actually, I had already recorded this episode, but I kind of did it off the cuff. And then I thought, man, that was pretty good. I need to go write this down. Then when I wrote it down, it got better. And so now I had to come back and redo the episode. And I kind of followed my text version because it was much more squared away. So that's why, it might have sounded kind of like I was reading, because I was reading. I was adding in a little bit of other stuff, content to it, but mainly I was reading what I had written on my LinkedIn profile, because that was much better than what I shared last time. It got better. That's why I love writing. If you've been following me for a long time, I always say I can think so much deeper when I'm writing. And so I had a lot of fun writing that lesson. But it's the first time I've really ever taught it to anybody. But I see it myself, and I wanted to share it with you guys, because whether you're an individual or a leader, you can see these levels of engagement in people. These levels, are they absolutely disengaged? Some are. Are they reluctantly engaged? Some are. Are they selfishly engaged? Some are. And are they selflessly engaged? Only a few are. Only a few make it to level 4. So I hope you're one of those folks. You're listening to these podcasts, you're definitely at level 3 or level 4, unless somebody's making you do it. If you're sitting around a table right now and somebody forced you to come listen to this podcast and you don't really want to be there, I'm here to tell you, probably everybody knows it, and probably your leader knows it. So if that's you, you don't have to change, but your influence is going to be limited. And I'm here to help you maximize your influence. I'm not here to help you limit your influence. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen, or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mack Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mack's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.